this woman is a piece of work, EJ. I guess we need to know that the purchases predate her 2022 appointment to the Fed 7-member board. Yeah, this is where Miranda Devine writes, one of 4 diversity appointments made by Biden as part of his peculiar obsession with identity politics above all. She's exactly right. The investigation is understood to include questions over whether Ms. Cook misrepresented her mortgage situation to the board when she was being vetted. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I guarantee she did. There's no question in my mind we're going to find out she did, because this is an economics post. Like, what is the Federal Reserve Board for? They're to oversee monetary policy involving the United States economics, and the Fed chair, you would have to have a squeaky clean financial background in order to make this post.
Way, you govern a little something that matters to people called mortgage rates.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, I'm going to put myself out on a limb and say, I guarantee you Lisa Cook misrepresented the mortgage situation to those she interviewed with when being vetted. And Trump, when he found out about this last week, went to Truth Social to demand that Ms. Cook, quote, resign now or be fired. And then Pulte, the guy who's like finding all these cases, who's trying to clean up the mortgage fraud situation, saying no one takes mortgage fraud seriously. They will when I'm done. He's like, I'm a one-man wrecking ball. I'm going to figure out whether there's a 2008 crisis looming from all the people who've been getting away with this, especially people who are in positions of power. So Pulte is just sort of this badass, take no prisoners dude. He responded on X, quote, the president has great cause to fire Lisa Cook, and then alleged that Fed Chair Jerome Powell might be complicit with Cook's alleged fraud. So that's incredible. Her term is not up until 2038, but if she's forced to resign, Miranda points out, over the mortgage fraud allegations, Trump will be able to appoint a governor of his choice to replace her, thus flipping the balance of the Fed in his favor, 4-3, and putting the heat on Powell. So everyone's going to say, oh, this is a political move by Trump. He's picking on her because he wants to control the board. I don't know what the truth is here, one way or the other, but I do know it'd be really helpful to her cause and those who are supporting her if she didn't do it. If they looked at the Ann Arbor mortgage application and the Atlanta mortgage application and found all the T's crossed and the I's dotted, like virtually every human does, because they're afraid of getting it wrong on documents like that, which we all know are legal documents, Emily.
Well, and this is incredibly sensitive to the average American right now, especially to people, by the way, my age, like 20s and 30s, who are trying to buy a house. So bad time to be under the microscope for potential mortgage fraud as a Federal Reserve governor. That's not going to help her one bit. I don't know what, like you said, I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes with Trump, but I asked Trump last month. I was in the press pool when he was touring the Fed, which was a spectacle, to say the very least. It was quite a day to be in the press pool, and asked him, because he keeps saying accurately that where the rates are right now is hurting people's ability to afford life, to buy homes, to have that stability that comes with it. So I said, well, why not just fire Powell? Why not why wait? Why, if that's happening, why allow that to go on for another 8 months or whatever it was at that point? And he said, well, because it's a really big thing to do that, and I don't think that it's necessary right now. So does that then translate to Lisa Cook, who is not Jerome Powell? Does that actually mean that Trump then feels more comfortable sort of putting a shot across the bow with somebody like Lisa Cook when you have all of this playing out, because the political structure around her is so sensitive that if you tell an average American, well, he got rid of her because it looks pretty clear that she committed mortgage fraud and you guys can't afford a mortgage, so why should she be able to commit fraud when the rates right now are so high that you can't buy a house? I mean, that is not politically a difficult argument for Donald Trump to make.
That's so true. Having secured herself lower mortgage rate mortgages, she then turned around and wanted to F everyone else, pulling up the ladder behind her. People who weren't prepared to commit the same fraud she allegedly did. All right, so here's a little bit more about Lisa Cook and why the New York Times, we're going to get into this New York Times piece, but this is why the New York Times decided to run cover for her this weekend. Even though no one's above the law, Emily, no one is above the law. The left has told us this for 4 years. She retweeted Ava DuVernay. Quote, This is what defund the police means. Don't let white nationalists and Trump make you afraid of the term. Defunding the police means defunding armed responses to issues that don't need a gun. And I guess Lisa Cook and Ava DuVernay are going to figure out which situations require a gun and which do not. Cool. I'd feel safe as a cop, wouldn't you?
Well, this is how we know Lisa Cook is rich. She wants to defund the police. She thinks it's a great idea. True. That's how we know.
Yeah. All right, here's another one. She retweeted about Tom Cotton's 2020 op-ed about sending the troops in to restore order. Running this puts my Black New York Times colleagues in danger. Remember when one of the New York Times writers wrote that? Yeah. Lisa Cook retweeted it. She's in danger. I'm in my big house in Ann Arbor, Michigan. She's probably looking at her lake views, wondering like, oh, how's my condo doing? Could I get an extra extension built onto it? Can I get the full condo soon? What can I have? Oh, yeah, retweet. My Black New York Times colleagues are in danger. Yes, I'm part of the struggle. She retweeted somebody saying Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia, who had just banned COVID masks, who wrote, quote, he's literally trying to murder us, especially BIPOC people.
That is unserious. I mean, this is somebody who is a federal, that is so deeply unserious for the position that she holds.
BIPOC, in case our listeners have forgotten, is Black Indigenous Persons of Color. She herself tweeted in 2020, I agree with Angela Merkel that free speech has its limits. Okay, so she's a radical leftist. Mm-hmm. That's why Joe Biden elevated her. Let's be honest. He elevated her because of the skin color and the lady parts. But this is all a bonus. This is all the cherry on top of the sundae. And this is the stuff that really made the New York Times fall in love with her. So they enter in, and you would think maybe, okay, when they assigned the chief economic correspondent of the New York Times, who you mentioned a minute ago, Ben Castleman, that he would write a straight news piece like, I'm the chief economics correspondent, so I need to care about mortgage fraud and the banking system and quality people running it. You would be hard-pressed to even find the passing mention of the allegations against Lisa Cook. Instead, you will be subjected to things like this. Quote, they are trying to paint this woman of color as someone who is unworthy of wealth. What? She's unworthy of wealth because they thought there was funny business with her mortgage applications based on the words she wrote in them. Okay. They go on to say she's one of just a handful of Black women in a field long dominated by white men. This is the same party trying to figure out why don't men like us? Why won't men talk to Democrats or vote Democrat anymore? Enter the New York Times. One of just a relative handful of Black women in a field long dominated by white men. Hate both categories. Economics, quote, is neither a welcoming nor a supportive profession for women. Lisa Cook and a colleague wrote in a New York Times opinion essay in 2019. She added, but if economics is hostile to women, it is especially antagonistic to Black women. 3 years later, Biden nominated her to the Fed's powerful board of governors. Her confirmation process was a difficult one. She faced repeated questions about her qualifications. We all know that's racism. Despite a resume that included stints at Treasury and the White House, as well as extensive academic experience, Kamala Harris broke a 50-50 tie. She was the first and remains the only Black woman to serve as a Fed governor. And now Trump is trying to force her out of that job. On Wednesday, Bill Pulte, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, accused her on social media of falsifying bank records and other documents in order to obtain favorable terms on a mortgage before she joined the Fed. Trump on Friday threatened to fire her if she did not resign. Cook has spoken out often about her experience with racism, informed her approach to economics. Why are we talking about that, Ben? He's pivoted immediately to her writings about how racism has informed her approach to economics. Perhaps her best-known academic paper, that was the one I mentioned, about lynchings, decreasing the number of patents that those lynched would ultimately file. Her findings showed that economies will be less innovative and less productive when governments do not ensure their citizens' safety. Well, I think we can all agree with that. I wonder if she's been speaking out in favor of the federal crackdown in your city, Emily, right? I mean,
something tells me no.
Right. I mean, we're a very pro-Black person, and we like citizen safety. And if you don't provide it, then you have a society that's less innovative and less productive. So I will have to check to see if Lisa Cook was out there tweeting in favor of Trump's takeover of the National Guard there with the police force. She's a former student. A former student of Cook's at Michigan State University was interviewed here, and she was the one who gave us that beautiful quote about they're trying to paint this woman of color as someone who's unworthy of wealth. They thought that was worthy of reprinting. They quoted her for the proposition that it's striking that they've chosen to target the Fed's only Black female governor. Why? What if the Black female governor was the only one who committed crime? Lady who took her class, Anna Gifty Opoku Agiman. What if Lisa Cook, as the only Black woman, was the only one who committed a crime? Should we go after her or no? Multiple choice. You pick one or the other. She said it was notable that the attacks on Ms. Cook focused on her property ownership, given that Black Americans were nearly 40% less likely than white Americans to own homes. You see, a Black person gets a home, never mind two, and old Whitey has to step in to take it away or say she didn't deserve it. That's what's really happening here, Emily.
This is, by the way, how Dems ended up with Kamala Harris as the nominee when yes. Biden was too old. And just about everybody looks back on that and says, if Joe Biden had picked a better vice president, maybe 2024 would not have panned out the way that it did for us. But because Joe Biden came out immediately and said, we are going to pick a woman of color for the position, they ended up with somebody not viable as a candidate because, by the way, she had to drop out of the presidential election before Iowa, the primary election before Iowa, but because they were so desperate to just check a box, which is so insulting to so many qualified people who may be Black or female or both, that right. You just end up throwing somebody in there who is not qualified, who is not the best person for the job. That is what happened when as Miranda Devine described in the article on Lisa Cook that you were reading from, Megyn, as this like fever dream that we all lived through, that Biden was a part of fueling, where you're just again, trying to check box as quickly as you possibly can. And the New York Times is clearly still stuck in that era, even though the rest of the country has moved on, because, again, you have a white guy living in Brooklyn who has worked in the media for his entire career, as far as I can tell, writing an article like this, which shows that the biggest bias in media is not even ideology. Ideology is downstream of class bias, because this is a case of a rich person taking advantage of the system and expecting not to get prosecuted and expecting to be above the law because there are identitarian reasons that can be the shield that protects you.
What will the effect of the sparring between President Trump and the Federal Reserve be? Can the Fed take the right action at the right time, or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown? And what does this mean for your savings? Consider diversifying with gold through Birch Gold Group. For decades, gold has been viewed as a safe haven in times of economic stagnation, global uncertainty, and high inflation. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you have an IRA or an old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or just buy some gold to keep in your safe. First, get educated. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. Just text MK to the number 989898. Again, text MK to 989898 and consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. So if the Fed cannot stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead for yourself. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.